Welcome everyone to this virtual platform of CTBUH India for an interesting discussion on post-pandemic urban habitat design. But before that, some preliminaries. I'm Girish Dravid, representing CTBUH India Chapter. The Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat is a 51-year-old international organization present in over 40 countries. CTBUH facilitates the exchange of the latest knowledge available on tall buildings around the world through publications, research, events, working groups, web resources, and its extensive network of international representatives. It compiles authentic physical, architectural, and structural data on all tall buildings in the world and presents it through its skyscraper portal for all to see and use. Through presentations, case studies, panel discussions, and interviews, it aims to acknowledge the contribution of the architects, engineers, and social thinkers to the urban habitat and tall building development. The Council aims to encourage research, development, and debate on the next generation of tall buildings and issues of urban habitat through the participation of industry professionals, advisors, and stakeholders. The Council is the sole arbiter of the determination of the height of the building under various categories and classify them with official certification. CTBUH India was established in 2014 to implement the aims and objectives of CTBUH International in the Indian context. Of course, for more information on CTBUH, visit www.ctbuh.org. And of course, you are welcome to become a member of CTBUH to avail the vast benefits that it offers. In line with CTBUH programs, CTBUH India is connecting with its members and other interested audience in this pandemic situation by bringing the stalwarts of the construction industry to its platform in association with IDAC. I thank all the panelists of this discussion who have responded enthusiastically to join us from across the globe. Let us now go straight to the session with architect Sandeep Shikre, who will be moderating the discussion. Over to you, Sandeep.
Welcome to this CTBUH India event, and I'm very thankful to all the panelists for accepting our invite for this particular webinar. This is the first webinar CTBUH India is doing during this lockdown period. It took a little longer time, but I'm very happy and I'm very glad to have all of you on board. So together we are going to put light on Mumbai city's development post-pandemic. We all thought that we'll focus on Mumbai city because Mumbai city has a typical building typology. Mumbai city has a particular type of a demography where if we focus on this, it will give a lot of message for other cities in India. So I would like to introduce you with my panelists. I have Mr. Sanjay Dutt here. Sanjay is very well known to our fraternity. Yes, Sanjay, we welcome you here on board. And he is currently Managing Director and CEO of Tata Realty and Infrastructure. He has got a wide portfolio with him, which includes around 53 projects and measuring 70 million square foot. He also has a leadership towards his infrastructure project, which includes the ropeways, roadways, and the metro stations. And he's committed for a very thoughtful development of Mumbai city. Sanjay has a very wealthy background of being a leader for CBRE. He was a founder member of CBRE. He was also CEO of Cushman Wakefield and then of a JLL. His involvement with Ascenda is also very well known. We all recognize him as absolutely a team member, a very collaborative partner. It's always joy to have him with us. So welcome Sanjay here for this session. I now move on to my second panelist. She is very kind enough to accept our invite, a professor at Columbia University for architecture and urban planning. And there are several things I can keep talking about. Hello, Geeta. Thanks for joining us on this particular webinar. And she has done urban planning efforts in almost every part of the globe, which includes United States, which includes Europe, which also includes India. And it's her passion to contribute a very inclusive. What I like about her approach that it's not only the architecture and engineering, but all her thoughts are moving around the social quotient of the people for whom the urban planning has been developed. That's really amazing. She's got several awards. She's also currently advising the mayor of New York City for the waterfront development. She was involved in Mumbai East Side Dock Line development. So she has got a wealth of knowledge which she is going to tell us today during this webinar. Thanks, Geeta, for joining. We welcome you on board. My next panelist is architect Amit Prothi. We are proud of you, Amit. You are from India, and after graduation from India, Amit did his post-graduation in landscape and infrastructure engineering from MIT, and he's been engaging his efforts for past 20 years. He's traveled 12 countries, and it's his passion to put his efforts for the resilient cities. He is a director of a resilient cities network, and he's currently in Singapore. He's got a lot of active knowledge about how these particular resilient efforts have happened in Southeast Asian countries as well as in many other parts of the world. So he's going to share with us his thoughts, especially related to our Mumbai city. I welcome you, Amit, here. We truly appreciate your participation on this program. The next panelist is Gaurav Chopra. Gaurav Chopra is based in Delhi, again, an architect from India, and he has done his post-graduation in New Jersey Institute of Technology. Further to that, he moved to California and has engaged a lot of efforts for healthcare planning, which also includes the California Medical Center, Kaiser Permanente, and he's been really engaging his efforts for this specialized niche healthcare. And today, he's contributing a lot to a Delhi city for having a very contextual solutions. We are very happy for you to have it here, Gaurav. Gaurav is heading HKS India as a managing director, and it's very kind of you to be here, be with us, and we are going to take a lot of insights from him for an immediate and a long-term healthcare master plan post-pandemic. I push my Mumbai panelist, Ratan Batliboi. So Ratan is also here, a senior stalwart from our industry. Ratan has an experience of 40 years in this particular field, and he's been heading a firm called RJB Consultants. Ratan's portfolio is also very wide. He's been doing institutional projects, urban spaces. He's been involved in a lot of initiatives. He's also a founder member of Education Environment. So welcome, Ratan. Ratan is going to play a role as an architect from Mumbai to have a collaborative interactions with all other panelists. So that is the introduction about all the panelists. Just to give you a quick background about today's subject, we thought that we'll focus on city of Mumbai, because Mumbai has a particular unique typology and a demography where we need a lot of solutions to be acquired for our urban renewal. So Mumbai currently is spread over 603 square kilometers, but almost 17 to 80% of the Mumbai city is covered by very challenging kind of a housing. So we have almost 55 lakh housings which are spread over slums, where their houses are having per capita almost 35 square foot kind of a housing system. And this particular incidence is more evidently visible now in this pandemic situation, because those areas have been created as a hotspot. Over the past 3 decades, there has been a lot of efforts to ensure that we have a habitable redevelopment for all of these slum dwellers. But today we have been able to do only 20% of that development. There is yet a lot needs to be done. So I would definitely like to have a view of all the panelists on this particular absolutely relevant and a hot topic for Mumbai city. Besides that, we have several other issues which are related to healthcare, public transport. How would the overall real estate market will behave from the point of view of a new normal, where people would want to work from home, people would want to have a co-living, co-working. So we're going to attach this to all of these issues as we move ahead with our this particular webinar. So my first attempt is to ask all the panelists to speak for 3 minutes through their presentation and give their response to this particular topic. So I would begin with Sanjay. Sanjay, if you could start with your initial thoughts, you can share the screen and 5 presentations can be shown. So if you could do that.
A very good evening to everyone. I think these are very difficult times, and I thought it was important to use this opportunity to share with colleagues on the panel the state of the nation in terms of real estate and its demand. For some reason, whenever we have debated and discussed, the discussions have alluded towards residential real estate, and that's dominates the headlines at all times. But I want to share with this group that we have a very strong and robust office real estate market, a growing and thriving warehousing and logistic market. However, because of excessive speculation last 10 years in residential, and almost because of herd mentality and excessive leverage, the residential sector has seen a huge inventory overhang. So very quickly, data points for you. We used to do about 5 to 6 lakh unit sales a year. We're down to 2-3 lakhs and eventually reached about 4 lakh, and now faced with the situation of COVID-19. So situation is quite bad on the ground as far as residential is concerned. To give you an understanding of how bad is this, I felt I share this with you. Because of this ongoing stress in the real estate sector, which I believe initially it was largely to do with speculation, like I said, oversupply, etc., etc. But last 3 years, it became a liquidity NBFC crisis. And therefore, lack of capital has led to a lot of stress. And therefore, it has changed the dynamics. According to last estimate, 2 lakh crore worth of projects are stuck, and 1 lakh crore of inventory remains unsold across major cities, which are about 43 cities. So this current COVID situation has, if you look at the left of the screen, deepened the disruption of the real estate sector. That's one takeaway from this slide. The second is the recovery of these segments. So at the bottom of these V shape that you will see office, retail, warehousing, we expect in 2 years' time, because right now corporates have put a freeze and taken a call not to do any capex, not to make any commitment. So year 1 and year 2 will go in gauging the extent of the COVID impact. And by second year, I'm almost certain that there will be a sharp recovery. And the reason for that, I would say, is residential markets are domestic consumption-led and office markets are global consumption-led, because the global centers flock to India to set up their businesses. To share with the panelists, in 2019, calendar year Jan to December, this country recorded the highest office absorption of 47 million square feet. That has never happened in the history of India. Bangalore leading the pack, nearly 16, Hyderabad 10, Pune 6, very large space take up across the 8 cities. While residential continues to suffer, but the general consensus was that eventually unsold inventory will get absorbed, and the demand for every 100 square feet office will actually lead to 1,000 square feet of apartment. And therefore, by that logic, if not every millennial is buying, 250 million square feet of demand should happen in residential. However, with this situation on the ground and lack of liquidity, the third figure of residential, most experts believe will be an extended U-curve recovery. And that's largely because there is no capital. So even if you want to, you cannot do a last mile funding of the project unless distressed funds like SBI cap driven Swami Distress Fund promoted by the government of India comes to rescue. But even if they were to come, it would only be 20,000 crores. And it'll be a while before the money actually reaches the developers, because a lot of due diligence will happen. A very quick look into what we think would the trends be. So the whole approach would be whether we have empathy towards customers. Are we caring enough? Are we equipped as a digital organization and platform? Are we sensitive to the needs of the changing work from home, which has already impacted all of us and is being appreciated? And a lot of IT companies are already outsourcing 30% of their workforce from work from home. So that trend will actually now accelerate. So it will push a lot of us to think differently. I see those as opportunities for many of us. A quick summary of this slightly cluttered slide, the companies who are decisive, they take decision and measures very sharply and quickly and are disciplined, rise faster and they leapfrog. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but that's the two takeaways of this slide. In terms of our MMR region, which I think is a very important focus area given the scale, we clearly have three districts. Mumbai with nearly 20 million population, Thane with over 10 million, Raigad 3.5. Pune, of course, is another nearly 10 million people. So a very strong cluster of 14 million people in less than 150 kilometers of distance of 2 hours ride. So very powerful region. So far, the majority of the industry was focusing on the mid segment, and only in last 3 years we saw rise in affordable and rise in office. In IT also helped accelerate that, and bit of manufacturing and e-commerce also helped. I think the concern here, what we feel is the construction workers, which are mostly migrant workers, which I believe will be instead of staying back and working, and after the lockdown opens, may actually go back to their villages and may not be available in the number and quantity that we want them. And during the monsoon, the activity will be slow. So the overall, the impact of the construction may actually be almost a year. So even though lockdown may be for 2 to 3 months, but the impact could be quite huge. I wanted to make sure that I cover slum because Sandeep wanted this area to be covered. Tata Housing is doing a 5-acre slum rehabilitation project in Chembur. And we intend to basically continue growing that segment because there's a huge opportunity. The only thing that I would say is, which bothers most of the developers right now, is the uncertainty of regulatory. So from 269 square feet of carpet for slum dwellers to 300, and there were some loose statements made that it could be 500. That severely compromises the feasibility of slum rehabilitation because dynamics don't work. One, the construction time period becomes extended. Second, the cost goes up, and the complexities associated with it, which is the density of the sale portion, becomes very difficult to manage, and the cost as a result actually goes up. But I have no doubt that the government will listen to all of us and appreciate that this requires a lot of work. Just 350 acres of Dharavi alone, with over 70,000 families, is right now one of the highest COVID concentration in the city. And that cannot go on if you want to make this city a great city, Sandeep. So I really wanted to touch on that aspect. I believe we need to engage with the government and we need to use the help of all the experts here to overcome this challenge. Thank you.
Very well added, Sanjay. We are going to talk more about this as we move ahead. Can I now request Dr. Geeta to also share her thoughts?
I would like to start by saying that COVID-19 is indeed a crisis, but in all through history, crises are what have helped cities transform. So I think we should take this opportunity of this crisis to rethink our cities and how we go forward in a very serious way. I want to say that till now, our development efforts have been focused on financial capital, and I think that leads to a lot of our problems. So I would like to propose that we now begin to think about ecological capital and social capital, which by the way includes health and well-being of people. So we begin to consider them equally when we develop projects. And every project that comes online and is being considered should have triple bottom line accounting requirements. So I'm talking about social urbanism instead of speculative urbanism. And just as an example, I'm showing the mohalla clinics that were made in the past few years in Delhi, and they are coming in so handy right now at the time of pandemic. And the government schools, many of them have been upgraded to be as good as private schools. And so this is the kind of political will that can make social urbanism so that everybody in the city, has the right to the city and has the right to enjoy the city, and the city to be empowering for everybody across the board. And one of the strategies, we talk about Singapore and how good things are there. And one of the reasons for that is that they don't sell land. So the government doesn't become a monetizer of land. The government continues to strongly keep its role as the protector of social good. So in Singapore, these apartments, this on the left is Pinnacle. It's a mixed use, a mixed income apartment building, very highly designed with rentals and very small rentals. So all sorts of people have access to housing. And on the right is a case in Mexico where the government said that, the private sector can do it better than us. So we're just going to give very low interest loans and let the private sector do it. I think as policy matter, we should very strongly stay focused on public transportation and pedestrianization, as you see in the green triangle. Smart cities are not where poor thrive, but where the rich take public transport. So I want to read for street-based urbanism. Lately in Mumbai and everywhere in India, we are seeing these gated communities, huge parcels, super blocks that just they just pop up with these tall buildings. And because the demand in India for housing is so much, they get sold and somebody makes money. But street-based urbanism is what cities are all about. I had a chance to be in this film, Citizen Jane, to say those sorts of things. I want to just mention that I had the opportunity to co-found URBS, User Generated Cities. It's a think tank. It is located in Mumbai. And for the last 10 years, we have been working on how do people live and what are the possibilities that development happen with them. And not that they are warehoused in the tall building somewhere and the rest of the 350 acres becomes available for for-profit development. But how can we develop in a way that the social capital of people is also protected? Right now, actually, in the Ravi, there are so many case studies of how people are taking care of each other. People who've lived there for a long time are actually feeding the migrant laborers. And the social capital is really coming in handy. So we should totally not think that this is a problem to be solved, but redeveloping our informal settlements, which really we should do, so everybody has decent housing and the right to the city, but it should be done with empathy and working with the people. This is a concept that URBS has developed about pool housing. And Sanjay ji talked also about Tata doing this big affordable housing project. But I think that we should not think about affordable housing as four walls and a roof. We should think about it as an empowering sort of development that makes people who were formerly living in informal settlements, enables them to run a small shop or have a small micro business or have a small craft situation. If we do not provide those spaces and those opportunities in public spaces, then affordable housing really becomes like a prison for people that, yes, they got tenure, but their livelihood disappeared. So that's something important to think about. Another nonprofit that I have had the opportunity to found is Asia Initiatives.
Yeah, that was pretty good, Dr. Geeta. May I now request Gaurav to begin with his presentation?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much, Sanjay. And thanks, Geeta. That was quite interesting. So thank you, Dr. Geeta. That was quite interesting. And thanks, Sanjay, for sharing your perspective. So when Sandeep reached out to me to share our thinking about, from a healthcare point of view, and my first reaction was, haven't we had enough of webinars? There's a lot of information that's floating around. So what do I have to share? We thought, okay, let's talk about some of our recent experiences, because we are caught up right in the middle of how our public health systems have been dealing with so far, and the tangibles in terms of actions to do. So reminds me of we've been, all of us have been doing a lot of reading, and this author in New York Times has stuck with me. Our CEO shared this article, and that's just stuck with me, that we don't get to choose our difficulties, but we absolutely have freedom to select our responses. So just to share, in terms of some of the actions, and I think maybe very quickly, I'm happy to share, some of the actionables that we have been engaged with, and then, what are the lessons learned, and moving forward, how is it causing a behavioral change in how, you and us, we engage with the larger urban framework, by and large. So just sharing some examples, well, by the way, we've been engaged, our teams have been engaged in the Wuhan hospital. Our Shanghai office was involved in the design of a large hospital in Wuhan, which is the ground zero, which was fast-tracked, and phones began ringing that, what are you guys doing there to fast-track those hospitals, and how we applying these things and the principles that we learned in Southeast Asia. When we are engaged with some agencies in US and just dealing with the, preparing some short-term responses. As you can see in the images that you're seeing, they're actually happening. They've actually happened, how countries, just in a matter of days and hours, they proactively, looked at creating alternate sites in tier 1 cities, tier 2 cities, tier 3, looking at, just about, from convention centers to, like Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York. We looked at, we talked to agencies about converting public spaces in India, to meet with the surge. A lot of, private engagements or entities are looking at, is there, with hospitality next to being very dormant, and that's an understatement. Are we looking at, new business models? Are we looking at alternate care sites? Something as simple as modifying, a hotel just to meet with the short-term surge. We couldn't help but think that what would happen on day zero, like today's day zero, when we are all working from home, and here we are connected, geographically distributed, but what would happen on day one when we all start, thinking about going back to our workspaces? With Mumbai, majority of the hospitals or the specialty hospitals being closed, but day one would happen. So, what would be the first intervention when these, when people like you and I go to these hospitals? How would these existing facilities, like public lobbies, public engagements, the interface between COVID and non-COVID patients, electives, and so on and so forth, what would be the simple interventions? So we began looking at from a very macro level down to a micro level, where, something as simple as rearranging furnitures, having plexiglass, segregation of people, and so on and so forth. Now, and, mixing of, individuals in elevator lobbies of hospitals, hotels, and so on and so forth. Having said that, we began looking at that, what would this mean to the way we engage with our operations, in terms of circulation and so on and so forth. We even looked at, this is right in our neck of the woods, that, what would happen to these facilities, with very similar structures in Mumbai, how people would, how do we segregate, the pandemic patients versus non-pandemic? How would ambulances and so on and so forth engage with the hospital by and large? What did it all mean to us? I think, listening very carefully, I think by and large, it's a wake-up call for all of us that we have to create a larger ecosystem. When we say a larger ecosystem, it's very, the pandemic, what it has done, if not anything else, it has exposed the disparity, the social disparity in our ecosystem. We've been talking about Mumbai, where, in some areas with 2 lakh people per square kilometer, comparing to Manhattan, which, from the last article that I read, is about 27,000 people per square kilometer, just in relative terms. So something like in the congested areas, where practically the social distancing is next to impossible. But very simple interventions like people, don't have places where they have hand washing mechanisms or, supply of water and so on and so forth. And it's all interconnected. What does it mean to us? I think like Geeta, you mentioned, Sanjay, you mentioned, I think we got to start looking at in a very tangible, actionable item form. What does it mean to creating a complete ecosystem that began from a very large, healthy campus around health and safety, identifying these nodes, down to our buildings and down to where we have something as simple as where people are interacting with each other. And it is at just about every place. So I think we can, continue with that, but that's just about, I think, just for a start of a conversation. That's all I have. Sanjay, over to you. Thank you.
That was quite insightful, Gaurav. Healthcare is one of the most important things. And today we are facing all of these problems which are all circulating about the healthcare. I would now request Amit to just give his thoughts.
Thank you, everybody. First of all, it's amazing that we're all trying to understand how do we work with technology, which was something we were thinking about it, but we weren't really gusto into it about 2 months ago. So it's amazing how our worlds have literally changed in a span of 2 months. And why is that important is that we talk about things can happen long into the future. Climate change can bring risks into the future, and suddenly we're in the middle of one that happened really, really, really quickly. So I work with a network of cities called Global Resilient Cities. I'm actually based in Singapore. I am going to pick up some of the threads that Dr. Mehta talked about, and I'll also try to respond to the comment that Gaurav, you raised. But I just want to highlight what we do globally is we work with about 100 cities, and we understand, we share learnings. The idea is it's a network of cities that shares what they're doing, and these are cities, New York on one end, Sydney on the other end, and a variety of cities in the middle. I want to highlight that this link between public health and urban planning and infrastructure is something that is really old. Cities have always reacted or come out from disasters, and public health disasters being one of them. We are all very familiar with zoning, the modern zoning of separating out land uses. So it has some of its roots in public health crises in the US and UK in the 19th century. So, public health crises led to the modern zoning, led to separation of land use, led to creation of parks and playgrounds. So health crises have led to improvements of cities. Similarly, the cholera outbreak in Memphis, Tennessee in 1878 was actually the start of the modern sanitary engineering in the US, where sewerage or laying out infrastructure to manage waste from households became something that really became big after that disaster. The reason I say that is going back to Dr. Mehta's point, any crisis shouldn't be wasted, and what can you do about it? So with that in mind, I thought, let me share 2 different examples. One is from Singapore. I think we all kind of look at Singapore as good urban planning, but what does that actually mean at the end of the day? So I'll take a few minutes talking about what Singapore really does. They do very, very well long-term integrated layered thinking. They've had a concept plan for their whole island, and their island is around 709 square kilometers. So it's not very disliked Bombay, frankly, where they've been planning for it conceptually from 1971. So from 1971, they've had a plan that looked at 50 years and said, how will we manage our land? And that concept plan then drives every other decision related to land use and transportation. And the concept plan is basically made in consultations with all of the government departments to understand what are their projected needs in the coming decade to decade. When you come to housing, Singapore has been extremely, extremely bold right from the day it got independent. 1965, there were more than 500,000 slum housing in Singapore for a population, I think at that time was around 2.5 million. And the government basically said, we will provide housing for everybody. So about a week ago, Singapore, or a week and a half ago, Singapore had maybe 1,000 cases. In the last week and a half to 2 weeks, they've shot up to around 11,500. Because a lot of the COVID is spreading in these dorms that were housing the worker housing. So Singapore is obviously not solving the challenge very well. So what might be some other models we could think about? There's another model that people might be familiar with, which is most, I think Mehta talked briefly about it. It's the incremental model. Very recently, Alejandro Aravena from Chile won a Pritzker Prize for some of his thinking around this, which is saying you don't have to build an entire house for starting off. If you want to keep it affordable, you allow some basic infrastructure to be put in place, and then people develop it as they go along. So it's incremental, it's inclusive, it's participatory, it's more bottoms up. This is also an approach that the World Bank has been doing for a while. They've tried it in Mumbai, they've tried it in Chennai and around the world. Initially, it was not thought about highly, but more and more they're finding that projects that they started 30 years ago, where they created smaller sites, so these are much smaller than what the norms might be saying, so that they can provide that affordability that's needed, provided basic infrastructure, and then allowed people to add to that over time. And that's led to some very successful examples. So I'll leave you all with those thoughts. Thank you.
That was pretty insightful, Amit. Ratan, you have heard to everyone. Everyone has kind of elaborated their thoughts about the current global situation and has put together their thoughts. I would like you to respond as to what is the take home for you as an architect from Mumbai. And of course, each of those approaches were quite unique. They had a lot of potential. They had a lot of good thoughts for us to take ahead. So what's your response to all the other panelists this presentation?
So I'm just going to read out a couple of points that I've written down a few minutes. My question is, so what's different? Safe, resilient, inclusive, sustainable. Haven't we always wanted this kind of thing for our city? If this was a destructive calamity, natural calamity, earthquake, fire, flood, tsunami, everything would have been destroyed physically. We'd be forced to rebuild. This time, all the physicality is intact. Humans are threatened, lives are at stake, but the infrastructure remains perfectly status quo. Streets, transportation, sanitation, water, housing, amenities, same. The number of people staying, the same. The pressures of survival in the city, the same. The aspirations, the ambitions of our migrants, of our corporates, of the individuals, probably the same. Very soon it's going to be back to business as usual, and then there will be no physical reminder of COVID, the way it's been impacting our lives. Post a war or post a flood, there's always going to be this huge wake of destruction, and people will remember that for a long time to come. I think our resilient Bombay, our resilient Mumbaikar is going to just bounce back into business as usual, into work as usual, into live as usual. This time our problem as planners or as livers or the social infrastructure, it's going to be a challenging problem. It's not going to be physical. It's going to be a mental problem. It's going to be psychological problem. It's going to be hugely social problems. It's about rethinking and reimagining our lives and our social distancing, masks, sanitation, sanitization, washing your hands. I mean, how many times can we do it every day, and how many of us can really afford to do it? Do we have those means? The lifestyle for a few of us will change by virtue of this economic downturn. I mean, it's bound to happen. Malls, theaters, restaurants, the IPL will get cancelled maybe. You'll be a little uncomfortable sitting next to a person so close. Will our Maidans, will Marine Drive, will Worli Sea Face, will our beaches, will our parks, will our public spaces change? Will people stop going there? Will people stop traveling to and from work? Can they afford to actually stop traveling? You and I and a few of us can sit in our homes and dictate new terms of operation, new terms of engagement. Work from home, technology assisted everything from commerce to banking to shopping to entertainment, recreation, sports. Even the kids' exercises are monitored. I mean, my little kids, I'm seeing them doing football classes on video. Okay. How many of us live in this city in this category? 10%, 15%, 20% maybe? What about the 7.5 million people who are traveling to work in and out every single day on the suburban train? Can they afford to go slow? Can they afford to reach late? Can they afford to change stuff? 10 to 12 reported deaths on a daily basis. That's like 4,000 people a year. Who's worried about them? Who's ever asked about those numbers? Where do these people come from? Where do they go? Are we really concerned about these masses? And if we are, what are we prepared to sacrifice for them? And if we are prepared to sacrifice, what are we prepared to sacrifice? How are we prepared to sacrifice? And when are we prepared to sacrifice? Will we continue doing the jhadu pocha in our houses? Will we continue to cook? Will we continue to go shopping for vegetables, fruits and bread like we're doing today? Or will we expect our servants to come in and take care of us? My firm has been doing what we term social architecture for a long time, probably 3 out of the 4 decades that I've been practicing, and primarily to positively, very strongly impact the lives of the people, many, rather than enhance the lives of a few. While we were involved in the Bandravali ceiling and we were involved in the Yamuna signature bridge, these huge, monstrous things that help maybe 7-8% of traffic car owning individuals. Okay. Our railway station projects, our suburban railway station projects, our metro rail, our monorail projects are actually, probably about 75 of them by now, are actually impacting and giving the minimal respect that we can provide for our non-webinar population. We've suddenly become a webinar population and a non-webinar population. We've suddenly become a population that is working from home and looking at ourselves productively and efficiently and effectively. And we're staring down at these people who have nothing to do, no social recourse, no economic recourse, sitting there and maybe desperately trying to get out to do something, getting caught by the cops, beaten up and sent back. Our focus now will have to be on using our design skills, our system thinking, our sensitivity, our empathy, and our logic to tackle all our new concerns. Housing, sanitation, infrastructure, transport. I mean, COVID has only put a big magnifying glass on the state of this. And all we need to do is rethink densities, maybe rethink carrying capacities for our cities. We need to probably flatten the curves of our socio-economic divide. We've been talking centralization, decentralization. We've been talking about open spaces. We've been talking about communication. The question is, so what's new? The question is not what, but how and when. Let's bring back what architecture was supposed to be doing in the first place. I'm speaking as an architect. Working for containers for humans to live, work, play, celebrate, ideate, enjoy. Protect us from the elements, from the wind, from the sun, from the rain. Allow social interaction more effectively, basically to enhance the quality of our lives. I think all of us need to be socially conscious, sensitized to the life of others, be activists, be advocates for them, serve them well, use our skills to the great to be more democratic. The rest of us still just live the way they do, they build the way they do. They're survivors, they're resilient. Human beings are resilient by nature. We will survive anything. As architects, all we can do is probably make it a little more pleasurable for all of us. And I'm going to stop here and let's see where this goes.
Very well said, Ratan. I think these are great thoughts. And I think COVID has just put a magnifying glass on us to look at it in a more serious manner. All the points that you have said are and have been issues for our city, and I think we look into it in a more depth, and we need to develop some kind of a nice master plan to ensure that slowly and steadily we win over this situation and create and rebuild our city to have a better lifestyle, better health, and equality in all the social segment of the society. So, Amit, we were talking a couple of days before about your involvement in Seoul, your involvement in Singapore, and resilient efforts in cities. So, would you like to focus something which is again pertaining to current situation in Mumbai, as you have studied now the demographics of Mumbai? I also shared with you the flood control master plan, the transportation master plan, the metro line master plan. So we have a lot of things there. But in terms of our development control plan, it only talks about the zoning. How do we ensure that this particular development goes in the right direction? Could you please throw some light on how it has been done in these cities where you have been involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it touches a little bit upon what Sanjay is saying and what Geeta is saying and others are saying. The predictability, I think, so the opportunity now really is we have a crisis on our hands. COVID is a crisis, right? And everybody is affected. So I like what Ratan, you were saying that, when you see an earthquake and a building falls, you have to replace that building. But usually it's in certain areas. Right now, everybody across the country is affected. So there is a certain psychological, credit, maybe there is a certain opportunity that if we can tap that and think about what does recovery mean. I'll give you examples from different cities in the world. We already have as cities in Europe, cities in Latin America, some of the North American cities that have already said, while I'm responding right now, part of my government is responding to the crises, managing the pandemic, etc. Certain parts of government are already thinking about recovery. And recovery is not just economic recovery, even though that will be the key priority. How does the economy of your city start? Because everybody's, job losses, if you look at the US job losses, 5.5 billion people, everybody's suffering. How do you bring that back? But that also then links to national government will play a big role right now, right? National government, the chances are, if you want to kickstart your economy, construction might be one of the sectors you put money into. So if there is going to be money coming into the construction industry sector to say, let's kickstart the economy because we need to bring those jobs back, is there a way to direct that to address some of the challenges we are facing? Because, Mumbai has a 1 million affordable housing plan. I think the Chief Minister's announced such a plan. You've got the Prime Minister's Awas, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. It's not that housing is not a focus, it's just that it's not moving. And it's not moving because land is expensive, it's not moving because land is outside, it's not moving because there's red tape bureaucracy in the public sector. Sanjay, you talked about, if I still have to get that wet stamp. So is this the opportunity to sort of step back and say, if we need to move construction quickly, are we just going to do the projects that are on the shelf right now? It's that bridge, it's that, or can we take this opportunity to quickly put some smart minds together? There is no shortage of smart minds in India. If this is, and if you can get the Chief Minister or somebody leader to say, I'm tired, Mr. Ratan Tata recently gave I saw his talk, right? He's talking about we've completely forgotten the slum dwellers. I mean, the Singapore Prime Minister on TV went and said, I am sorry to the worker class. I am sorry that we have failed you, right? So this is an incredible moment if you think about it, where everybody is affected. So can we all, using our political, connections, etc., push for a bold slum rehabilitation strategy? And it has to be bold. It cannot be piecemeal. I mean, I think the piecemeal approach, we're trying one project here, one project there, that doesn't work. So I think I'm asking all of us to be bold and be creative. Architects are the most creative people in the world.
So I agree with you, Amit. It's a time for everybody to stand tall, accept the responsibility, which also includes government. And we have been talking about inclusive policy, where the developers planners, the citizens, and the policymakers come together, sit down together, and develop something that is acceptable to all of us. There have been some efforts, and I would again like to uh, appeal to Sanjay through the NAREDCO, through the MCHI, through all these strong builders association, through all these strong architectural association, we must take that very proactive step now. Now I move to Gaurav. Gaurav, we also have an issue in Mumbai whereby at any given time, we have at least 1.5 to 2 million uh, construction workers coming to the city, because there's a lot of construction happening in the city. So these are the daily wagers. And typically, since the land is less, we don't have a proper provision for them for their site labor camps. And eventually it ends up into more illegal and unauthorized kind of development, because these all people are coming here with a lot of enthusiasm and hope to develop their prospectus. So is there any way we can create, as you were talking about in Delhi, Mohalla clinic, some kind of a healthy way of creating this system for this Delhi wage workers who are coming to Mumbai city?
I think, you said it, and Sanjay, I think you pretty much, I like the provocative nature and the diversity of this conversation. When you think about it, it's about time that what is happening right now is we are all questioning the status quo, and we mentioned something like the large scales of construction or design and construction happening in Far East, like countries on the eastern side of India. I think one of the biggest differentiators is in those countries the change is coming from top down, so no questions asked. In India, what's happening right now is the change is coming from bottom up. So when that change is happening, that becomes a movement, and it amazes us as well that we are using with all the technologies and the resources and the think tanks available out there. It's difficult to fathom why we still have to do a rubber stamp and wet sign on the drawings, whereas in other places you're using technology to do a digital model. But when we just go around the room in terms of accommodating construction workers, whether we're talking about the social design that Mr. Batliboi mentioned, and the financial framework, just making the projects feasible, like Sanjay mentioned. I think when you look at it from a macro level, we are sitting in a power position right now. So the webinar population, if you will, I think this is the right time to develop a framework where even something as simple as construction workers, and it is possible. I've seen a couple of buildings in the heart of in Mumbai, which are by and large some of the most beautiful construction sites I've ever seen in my life. With the kind of housekeeping, safety, and with very many developers. So it is possible, but to make it viable socially, economically, that has been a challenge. And I think the message needs to be loud and clear for those of you who are sitting in Mumbai to engage with the public sector, with the authorities, and so on and so forth. So they're more receptive about these changes. And everything is interlinked. I think so we've got to start thinking from a wellness point of view, not only for the consumer, for something like what Sanjay mentioned, or wellness of not just the larger population of the community, like we heard, but the entire ecosystem, because everything is just interlinked, and the same can be extended to to our health facilities there, and so on and so forth. So the point is that all this is definitely possible, and we got to take lessons from our neighboring countries, and definitely it's possible. I can name you projects where you'll see some of the most spectacular work out there in your neck of the woods.
True. So Ratan, again, some of the questions which are our regular questions. How do we sensibly make the tall buildings? There is a need of a tall building, but it's more important now that every tall building, high density, high-rise structure you do has to be more responsible, more sustainable. So the typology of the Mumbai city, I personally feel it has been left very open. So do you think the time has come where all the sectors of Mumbai City has a 221 wards, and there has to be a policymaker who should appoint a urban planner and develop a very uniform development of whole city, and then the developers would follow that kind of urban planning guiding principle. So how do you want to address this mixed use, high density, high rise, tall structures? Uh, what are your thoughts on that post pandemic, especially keeping in mind
So,
the current calamity that we have?
so I'm going back to my college days. During my thesis, my project was high-rise, high-density, high-income housing. And I used to do this analysis because it was the early 70s when the Cuff Parade area was done in Bombay. And that seemed to be the only sort of solution to Bombay. And then I did some research and I responded by working on and checking out and studying the Parsi colonies, the chawls, the business, the sort of housing typologies. And I realized that the density that you were doing at Cuff Parade was almost the same as the densities that you were doing in these chawls or in these areas. Okay, in terms of density, not FSI. The trick was basically instead of plotting and leaving these stupid marginal spaces around the buildings, the trick was to go low rise, walkable, 4 stories, maybe even 5, and consolidate and structure it in such a way that you get all the other peripheral spaces as social spaces at different levels of hierarchy. So family spaces slightly bigger in terms of 2-3 neighborhood, slightly bigger in terms of the community, etc., etc. I don't think high rise is the solution. I think when we have a plot of land that we can exploit, the problem is plotting of land. Bombay has been plotted into postage stamp situations, and everybody has got to sort of go vertically to understand and figure out what's going on. When we talk about Dharavi, for example, if you have 350 acres of Dharavi, let us say for argument's sake that 200 of those 350 acres are not accessible, as in it's being reviewed as open space. And you just did these linear, continual buildings, not necessarily in a straight line, in whatever in whatever situations you wanted, you could probably achieve a huge density and the incredible amount of open space working with that. Yeah. So to me, for example, the way to kick this forward is I'm not getting into a theoretical situation, but I'm saying very practically. Let me say that if I had a large open space today, a Maidan, I start developing the infrastructure in that Maidan and I rehouse the entire slum into the Maidan with the assurance that when that Maidan is fully occupied and slummed out, the slum which it was rehousing is actually broken down and made into a Maidan. This way you get brand new infrastructure, you get brand new housing typologies, you get organized situations. Let's put it this way, Sandeep. You have slums which are normally a ground plus 2 at best. Okay. If you went ground plus 4, you automatically open up 50% of the space. If you go ground plus 4 organized, you already probably open up another 10-15% of the space. And all this open space is going towards healthy living, towards well-being, towards fresh air, towards services. I mean, we're building SRAs into 30-story buildings, so the guy can't pay for his lift. Nobody is expected to go up and down walking. Yeah? So these are the kind of quick ones. And in Indian context, the way I've worked with all my public projects is that you have a two-pronged attack for any problem solving. So the way you first problem solve is to try and engineer or design the solution. If you can't do it by engineering, you probably try it by education and awareness. And if you can't solve it by education and awareness, you do it by enforcement, discipline. This is exactly what's happening with COVID. You're trying and telling the people, guys, stay at home. If they don't stay at home, they come out on the roads, etc., etc. You're picking them up, taking them to jail, or hassling them or hitting them on the roads. Okay, that's unfortunately you have to deal with it like that. So if you look at it in that sense, that's the trick in the book. Yeah. And I think
I agree with you, Ratan. So this takes me back to Sanjay. Sanjay, there is a need of a large number of affordable housing. Now, how about an organization like you do a partnership with the government? Because now there are too many things are happening. Government has a pressure of creating a huge stock for the low income and a middle income group. And on one side, developers are creating more luxury housing. We do not really know whether the demand supply situation is favoring for a luxury housing, because it's quite natural that after rehabilitating the slums, the developer has an ambition to create something which is more profit generating, which is perfectly fair. But currently, if you look at the whole, and you come from the real estate analyst background, you know you've done that all of your previous career. So, is there a need for a reputed real estate developers like you to do a partnership with the government and say, hey, like Ratan said very well now, we will go for a low rise, low density, but a nice quality housing, and we will restrict few zones where the high rise can go. In earlier times, only the South Mumbai used to be a high density and a high rise, and that's how we lived for a good amount of 30, 40 years. Today, it's spreading everywhere, and I think the time has come back again where probably we will need to make it more equal. So, have you thought anything on that particular thing?
Sure. So I will take the first question. Both Tata Realty and Tata Housing is a partner with government. In a way, one is certainly our Mulund property, which is it's called Avisa. It's in partnership with a local developer called Richa. It's a 2 million square feet Mahada rehab development. And we rehoused all the tenants of Mahada into new buildings, and the other buildings are about to commence soon. Second, of course, when I was listening to the example of shifting into a Maidan and then creating the right product and therefore converting the opportunity there and decluttering the city and making it slum free. Port Trust of India has 1,800 acres between Balat Pier to all the way to Chembur. MMRDA is doing about 45 million square feet. As a consultant, I did the feasibility study for it for Chandrasekhar at that point of time. And all they have to do is give 300 acres out of it. First, understand the social gaps, social infrastructure gaps in the city, and make sure that that quotient is kind of met. Then look at 30-year plan, not damage control approach, which is what we've been doing so far in terms of infrastructure, in terms of density. I mean, sometimes I wonder that you have these town planning department, what do they really do if they don't plan? What are they doing right now in those beautiful heritage
that's exactly,
buildings, which ideally I would like to ask BMC to vacate so we can convert that into self-ridges or heritage hotel, create revenue opportunity for the government and house them somewhere in Navi Mumbai so they can, think logically. It just beats me completely. So if you have these simple ideas, like earlier our colleagues said that we have the brains, it's all this political vested interest and some private interest is causing roadblocks to all of this development. So you definitely need a kind of a transformational approach. I think the single most important question that I would like to ask any politician right now is, do you have the courage? And I know they have the courage when they go on the mic and speak about the opposition, but do they have the courage to change? To stand out there and say that I will make sure that we ensure that the poor of the city are genuinely taken care of, whether it's port trust, whether it's defense, whether it's railways, land can be utilized. By the way, the three biggest landlords in the city are these. You don't need private land. The government can ask private developers for an EPC contract, Tata Projects Limited. I was talking about Tata's contribution, working with government. We, of course, are doing a metro project, as you know, in Pune, which is a 7,000 crore project, nearly $1 billion with Siemens in partnership. Just to show our conviction that we can partner with the government, even though when the government changes, we go through some setbacks and hiccups in our corporate offices. But let's take an example of BDD Chaur, which we are committed. That's a very large redevelopment project in Worli. And Vinayak Deshpande from Tata Projects is doing an excellent job of reviving that area. So there is a huge potential for development entities, EPC firms to actually contribute, as long as there is a very clear, simple business model. And that business model should address the uncertainty in the whole business model. If those surprise elements are removed and it's simple, I'm sure we can do much more. We heard the earlier example of China.
Yeah.
I've personally gone to Mundra port. I know what India is capable of if you really want to do large infrastructure projects. So it's all there. It just need this state, the federation structure of center and state needs to be sorted out.
Yeah. Sure. Thanks, Sanjay. It was a very important. Dr. Geeta has been quite for a long time. So, Dr. Geeta, we would like to know more about your initiative, the social capital credit. How it has helped with urban planning, because I can see the viewers' question. It's all moving around the equity. We all have to become human. What has to be done with the slum? So it's all about that. Can I request all the panelists to mute your audio so that we can have a better audio quality? Suddenly, yeah. So, Dr. Geeta, if you could explain us more about the social capital credit and how it can help for the urban renewal.
Thank you. So social capital credits, or SOCs, as we call them, is the community currency for social good. Actually, just this week, we were recognized as one of the 100 world-changing ideas by Fast Company. And so we've been doing it in 4 countries, India, Ghana, Kenya, and United States. And the concept is very simple. You do something for your community and you earn SOCs, just like airline points maybe, and they go into your app or your SOC book, and you redeem them for something that you need. So for example, we won the Happy City competition in Amravati in Andhra Pradesh, and there we were helping communities to come together and design and care for their public spaces, right? But it's very flexible. It can be used for waste management and safety of communities, or giving rights to neighbors or whatever. So the government cannot do everything, and our concept is to leverage social capital, which is the strength of communities. So we do that, and but in this crisis, SOCs has suddenly become very, very important, because so many migrant workers have had to go home to their villages, and they have no income and they have nothing to do. So we are right now working in 6 states in India to get these people. They are particularly, we are working in drought-prone areas, and we are getting these workers to dig rainwater harvesting or check dam, so that when the monsoon comes, at least the drought-prone areas will have water to feed the fields. But it's a very flexible community currency that incentivizes people to come together and do social good. And I'm just very strong believer that yes, for shocks like COVID and floods, which I think are going to happen more frequently, we need physical solutions, but we also need social solutions. So how do you bring community together to work alongside government and come together when an emergency like this happens?
True.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we do.
Also, we have worked in Mumbai for our East Dock line. We have spent a good amount of time. So, could you please tell us like how and what were your thoughts? Because as Sanjay mentioned, we have a
Yeah.
huge piece of a land in Mumbai which yet needs to be properly reutilized so that we have a proper equitable distribution of our densification. So, could you please throw some light on your efforts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with Sanjay and many of my other colleagues who have said that, the Indian economy is going to be quite depressed when we come out of this. So how do you kickstart everything? And an amazing way to kickstart would be with construction. And it would be amazing to, take the opportunity of the Mumbai docklands, which is 1/6 of the island city of Mumbai, and have a plan. We need to start making that right now. That is equitable, right? That is socially equitable. It has mixed use, mixed income areas, housing, public spaces, restoration of historic properties. So we really need to think big. I almost think that we should think about like the New Deal in the United States. We had the New Deal at the time of Depression, and then everybody got, well, not everybody, most people got employed and the economy jumped up. So we should think about not just the New Deal, but a Green New Deal. Everybody's saying, okay, in India, the air is better, right? So we know we can do it. So let's have a New Deal that's a Green New Deal and a social New Deal, right? So I think, and we can kickstart that with construction, because construction employs a lot of unskilled labor. And nothing gives people more dignity to have the job. And also I would say that, we are talking about social distancing now. Indians are experts at social distancing, whether it's because of the caste or the lower income. I mean, we have so little empathy for these things. So I think we should go from social distancing to social empathy. And we should really think about how we are going to build infrastructure. Like, we've been working in Dharavi, right? They have so much social capital, but the problem is that they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have a reasonable quality of housing done with them, not for them, not about them, but with them. And social capital credits really brings people together to think together and partner and do it. And similarly, so many housing developments, a developer builds them and goes away, and then the public spaces start to deteriorate and so on. So the social capital credits make sure that people come together for a cause, and it's accountable, right? It goes like the airline points into your account, and you get something for it. So it's very flexible, but that's what we are doing.
Yeah, I think that was good. So my next question is going to be with Gaurav. Gaurav, there are a lot of people asking here, like we all know that this particular epidemic situation is largely due to the healthcare calamity. So what would be your suggestion for the healthcare revival master plan? There's been also an article in Time magazine which says instead of, or rather, along with spreading the healthcare facility, can we also have a rapid response healthcare kind of a squad where we are quite equipped to take care of such situations in future? And we now want to know the enforcement. We have been talking about case studies. Can you tell us what should be the action plan now and immediately post lockdown?
Okay, thank you, Sandeep. I've been reading some of these comments and they're very relevant. I think the first things first, we need to reinstill that confidence in everybody. Why? The hospitals are facing a lot of pressure that on day one when they open, why would I go? Is there a fear of going to a hospital, whether COVID or non-COVID? So there needs to be a very clear plan of action about segregation of healthy from non-healthy, COVID versus non-COVID. In terms of actionable items, I think the first things first, if we start from a very micro level, from an individual level, there should be a retrofit of existing hospitals so that they're pandemic ready. And these are very simple interventions to cause behavioral changes by virtue of segregation of traffic, ambulance, non-ambulance, and so on and so forth. Next thing, what comes to our mind is there will be a surge. There will be a short surge. The government is looking at opening up of the public market, however you want to phrase it, and there will be a second wave, whether we like it or we don't, which basically means that both private and public sectors in our respective buildings, we need to identify spaces for temporary structures in line with the government guidelines. That's actionable, that's doable, we should be ready with that. Third thing, Geeta, you mentioned Mohalla clinics, a very interesting concept out of Delhi. There are roughly about 500 Mohalla clinics in the NCR region. And even though they are not positioned to do a first action response, like, beyond diagnostics, basic diagnostics, but they instill confidence in community clinics and so on and so forth. That's where people could go as the first step before surging the specialty hospitals. Third things, I noticed there were some comments about Wuhan. Now, it's a combination of the public, the infrastructure, the hospital, and even human behavior. In Shanghai or in China, by and large, they have leveraged on technology, and we are sitting on a huge plethora of where we can use technology. They have a counterpart of something called this Arogya Setu, where the smartphones have these color apps that basically identifies what zones you have been. So if you're in if you have been to a red zone, every person who's entering, exiting railway stations, buildings, public, private, they are checked, and the law enforcement agencies are in an authority to position to ask you for your color code. You're in a red zone, you'll stay in a red zone, you're in a yellow zone and green zone, and so on and so forth. And that has been very diligently enforced there, and which has even helped us in our, we basically expedited the construction of that hospital, but in very close collaboration with the government about enforcement. So these are some of the things, we can do it in the near term. You mentioned about the master plan. I think pandemic readiness has to be made mandatory for all hospitals, not just for public hospitals, but also specialty hospitals. Decontamination of spaces, and these are very simple interventions that you can do for decontamination. In one case in Southeast Asia, on one of our projects in Hong Kong, which has been in the news for all the right reasons in recent times, they created decontamination spaces outside every public hospital. So the moment, even before I enter, you're triaged, you're decontaminated. So the risk is not only from other patients, but our biggest asset right now, the group that we need to worry about is our healthcare providers. So that's something that, needs to be instilled as a part of our plan. In the closing, for the whole master plan, wellness has to be integrated, the ideology of everything around wellness, access to healthcare, safety, and home healthcare. And there's, India is one of the, some of the technologies that are being developed here. There are institutions here where they're still making the concept of home ICU. There are a lot of private players. You can bring the ICU to your home. So these are some of the things that have to be adopted by virtue of code and regulations, especially in the context of Mumbai.
Sounds good. Just for viewers' knowledge, Dr. Geeta has requested that she has another occupation, so she may log off after 5 to 10 minutes. So Geeta, we just want to know now again the relevance in the city where you have been for past so many years. Can you give any examples in New York City where largely focusing on the redevelopment of challenging housing? Because that's something all the viewers are asking questions about. The biggest issue of Mumbai is to have re-housing for the slums and for the people who are in a challenging situation. So if you can quickly touch upon that, and of course after that, we would want you to be in the webinar as long as you can. But if you have to log off, I would permit you to log off. Yeah. Please make your audio on, Geeta. Dr. Geeta, your audio is off.
Yeah. So New York is one of the better cities in the United States for building affordable housing. NYCHA, or New York City Housing Authority, has built lots and lots of affordable housing. And in New York, there's a right to a home. So the city guarantees that. But it doesn't mean that the situation is perfect. Actually, a lot of NYCHA housing was built in the 60s and 70s and is quite dilapidated now. So we are actually working with NYCHA to work with the residents, because a lot of areas have become unsafe or really dilapidated. So we are trying to actually work with the residents, help NYCHA in conceptualizing how you bring people together so that the buildings can be improved and public spaces can be improved. But I think in the case of Mumbai, we should think affordable housing is one thing, but we should also think about rentals. And a lot of these migrants, we just call them migrants and forget about them. But the migrants actually have a home in the village and they come to the city for some time to work. And then they go home for the, cutting the crop or whatever. So they actually have two homes. So in the city, what they need is rental accommodation that is minimal but comfortable, which they can rent for the period they are in the city. So we really need to step up on rentals, really affordable rentals. And maybe there could be a possibility that with social capital credits, people begin to get some tenure or some other way to work their way. Like give them a roadmap, give really poor people a roadmap on how are they going to become owners. And the properties, like what mentioned, Amit mentioned, that, these don't have to be complete homes, but give them tenure, give them the minimum possibility. So I think we have to rethink what we think about affordable housing and what does that mean? There are like 100 categories in that we should be providing for.
Sounds good, and we surely want to know more from you. And you will have to log on for our viewers. Offline, we can take their questions and push it to you. Thank you very much for your insights. I now know Amit. Amit, if you have been given a task, and suppose the Mumbai Corporation appoints you as a advisor, and we give you a completely a free hand. No, because I'm telling you this, everybody wants to know the action. We have been talking, and all of us truly confess that we have not yet been together, have reached to a situation where we have a very convincing, concrete enforcement plan. So we really want to know from you briefly, what should be the immediate action whereby we see the visible results, where we actually want to see in 2 years, 3 years, and so on. What will you do? What change will you bring in here?
I think one of the things that I need to highlight is housing is not going to be solved overnight, right? So you need to think long term here. What do you need to do to think long term in Mumbai's case? You know the problem. All of us know the problem. 50% of the housing is in slums. How do you look at it from a more comprehensive perspective, which is long term, which has political buy-in, which has the right town planners? I think so. I'm trying to highlight there are certain key aspects that one needs to really think about. One, strong leadership, and I think Sanjay, you talked about. Who's the leader who's going to stand up today and say, "I'm going to solve Mumbai's housing problem"? You need that. With that, you need a good task force or a good panel or a good, literally a team of people who have political support, who have buy-in from the private sector, who've got the housing expertise. There are enough Mumbai experts sitting around the world and in Mumbai, right? You need civil society. You need these people, but on a high-level panel who can actually make decisions that the government can back. You need government to put in their money behind this. This is not going to get solved just by the private sector. This needs big funding support from the government. We saw that in Singapore. Singapore has not shied away to put in money behind solving their housing problem. Now, the opportunity is, we're not talking about the economic, downturn right now. And there will be some way, and this goes back to history, where a lot of times crisis leads to big infrastructure spending to kickstart the economy. Can you tie that back to housing sector and say, we need to solve housing problems in Mumbai and provide housing for all? And then if you go to Geeta's point, it's affordable housing, it's rental housing, it's a variety of housing. And this goes back to the mismatch right now between the demand and supply. The demand is for a variety of housing. The supply is just provided to one segment of the population. and that has become investor driven, and half of the properties are empty. This also goes back to, can we look at the lands in Bombay? How do we actually come up with affordable housing? We have so much government land, Sanjay. I mean, I really appreciate that point. A lot of cities have identified government lands, federal government lands, railway lands that are no longer needed. They were needed at some point in the city because there was a historic reason to be there. That reason may not exist anymore. Can you look at that land? And then that becomes government's incentive to the private sector to say, we give you land, you give us, certain amount of housing. So I think you really need to start thinking from a task force that brings in these different people, but has the power to make a difference and has to think long term. I think that's the boldness that we need. It has to be long term. It cannot be just a piecemeal short term.
Yeah, that was a good answer. Ratan, there are some architects asking question, can multi-purpose deployable architecture be a solution? Can we not think dynamic? How can our development plan be so static and rigid? Do we need to have continuous revisions in our development control plan? Of course, answer is yes. All of us have been talking that for the last 1.5 hours. But from an architect's lens, what would be your suggestions? Ratan, please on your audio.
I don't think we need clever new rules. I think it's a question of just using what we have and making the best of it. It's a question of using our new thinking and our resources. There are hundreds of ideas that basically can be used for housing. There's no right answer. You can use, this is a fabulous opportunity to experiment. I don't want this to be misunderstood, but we can have these incredible living laboratories of different ways of handling the housing problem across every part of Bombay. I think what we're going to be working with is trying to manage public's expectations. That's a big one, because every person that's being impacted today is going to expect the government to do something or expect some sort of dole outs. I think it's a question of how we're going to manage those expectations. The two things that I'd like to point out here is that what we expect from the government side, I'm using government very loosely, is that we should have all the interdepartmental collaboration. So roads, BMC, the planners, the technologists, the actual guys who execute, the actual guys who administer. We have these think tanks, we have these Saturday evening meetings once a week, but nothing happens on that. It's been happening for years. This is the time to be bold, furious, move really fast on integrated programs and get things going. This is the time for action. I think we've discovered new governance. Okay, cooperative housing society guys are like controlling their entire housing societies. That's fabulous new leadership. We should use that impactfully. There's the new social media that's been going all over the place. Nobody's depending on the religious sentiment or the religious leaders telling you what to do and how to do it. Okay, that voice has been shut down, and people are suddenly listening to the new rule, and that's fabulous. It's a great time to take advantage of all these things and go forward. In terms of, I think it's about moving fast. It's about moving and being risk and disaster prepared. If you did high-rise buildings, you were worrying about floods and therefore you kept open spaces on the upper floors. Suddenly, when you're worrying about earthquakes, you're worrying about high-rise buildings and you're keeping open space to congregate on the lower floors. I mean, how do you manage these expectations? How do you manage to have preparedness across everything? I think that's an important thing. And effectively, what I'd say is, I mean, I'm going one step forward and saying refuse, restrict, restructure, and then resolve. Yeah, we have to move into a new code of working, a new behavioral change. The new, roti kapda makan, sadak bijli pani is now going to be sathi, bachcho, or padosi. Yeah, I mean that's really what's come to life today, and that's eventually what life is all about.
I mean, it's a topic of everybody's interest. I can see yet around 800 participants are logging on, but somewhere we have to keep the sense of overall time. So I'm having last 5 to 7 minutes. So Sanjay, The same question in a different way to you. There is also a nice master plan our urban planners have done. We have got a Thane, we have got Navi Mumbai as a satellite town, which is doing a good job. Again, there is a complete master plan for equivalent area of Mumbai, which has been designed in MMR region. That is the right way to decongest and also ensure that everybody is not jumping into Mumbai. So that one way, but yet it seems to be more and more pressure. So if I give you a kind of a baton in your hand, I say, okay, please suggest some couple of very aggressive revisions in the current policy to see the immediate results. What would you say from the developer point of view? And also, as a real estate analyst.
Given my experience of the Navi Mumbai, when it was very timely implemented to decongest Mumbai and therefore create the infrastructure, I think after Chandigarh as a city, this was the only example where the infrastructure came first and then the people. Otherwise, it's the other way across the country. The reason why it failed at that point of time is because we did not take care of transportation. The harbor line connecting to Navi Mumbai was weaker than Western line and Central line. So transportation. Also the road connectivity, because of which even today is an issue, from city all the way to Vashi Bridge and therefore on the other side takes a lot of time. So no trans-harbor link. And the third factor was you did not create enough social infrastructure. Thane Municipal Corporation, Navi Mumbai Municipal Corporation was basically catering to industrial belt. At that time, the first petrochemical plant, which was established in 1966, over 420 acres, called NOSIL, where you have now the Ambani's Reliance Industries campus, and likewise many other chemical-based industries. So they could not transform into livable spaces. They were very industrial in nature. Fortunately, over the last 20 years, a lot of these things got addressed, and very soon we will have a trans-harbor and the airport, and slowly the transportation issues are getting resolved and social infrastructure is getting resolved. So if you were to plan and implement these timely, I think you can avoid not doing it. The second aspect is the role of a private developer. You would all know, Bandra Kurla complex was not opened for private developers at all. It was only for government companies and corporates who would fill up an application and get a land allotted and do their own buildings. And it was struggling. It was only after private developers were allowed to come into Bandra Kurla that it transformed into it. And that's exactly what MMRD did with Wadala, with a residential project of 6 million square feet about there. So we have a good possibility of partnership. The fifth most critical point from our point of view is feasibility or viability. If the government is not paying attention to this important criteria, then the purpose will never be served, in my opinion.
Good, Sanjay. Due to pressure of time, I'll have to slowly come to a kind of a conclusive thing. But all of us are talking the same language. We have to come together. There's a lot of strength in togetherness. There's a lot of strength in inclusiveness. And when we come together, we'll find a solution. And as Amit mentioned, there has to be a bold approach. And I'm sure we will see that very soon. So my request to all the panelists, just a one-liner message for all the viewers and for all the people. Very crisp, conclusive remark. I begin from Amit.
I think we have to change Mumbai's impression of from slumdog millionaire. I think that has to go away now. It's high time. We can do it.
Fantastic. Well said. Gaurav, what would you like to add?
Well, I would like to add that it's high time we get more proactive than reactive, not accept mediocrity in terms of tangibles. We've been hearing a lot of affordable housing. I'm just being respectful about it. That the norm should be made more stringent with context to hygiene, sanitation, and larger units. Now, to accommodate developers, balconies should be made free of FSI. I had to say that. But thank you.
Sounds good. Yeah. So, Sanjay, your audio is off, Sanjay.
Very quickly, you have to make real estate viable. Real estate is not viable because of holding costs, cost of doing business, and cost of capital in this country is abnormally high. And the government has to digitize.
Great. Ratan, from the architect's point of view.
I think we have to work. I think we have to work with the government to see that we can do aggressive implementation, fast and furious. There's no question about it. We can look at it incrementally, but we have to have a master plan. And risk and disaster management or risk and disaster preparedness, I think, is top down. I mean, you can't compromise on that.
I think that sounds very good. I would say, like what our former president had said, you can't change your future, but you can change your habits. And your change habits can change your future. So let's all look at it in a very optimistic way. Thank you very much for joining us here. And before I conclude, I must sincerely express my gratitude to all the workers, all the healthcare workers, all the people who have been putting in their lives into a risk to keep us safe and safety, which also includes our Prime Minister, our Chief Minister, our Police Department, our security forces, essential goods service providers, bankers, seafarers, and so many unsung heroes. We are truly, truly obliged to them. We have a good salute to them. And be safe, be good, and I would say Jai Hind. Thanks, viewers, for joining us. We'll catch up with you very soon.
Thank you.